Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Matt here. Today bringing you another stage analysis video. Just a quick reminder, the structure of these analysis videos are going to start with me explaining the stage design, showing any dope cards if applicable for the stage, then going through the actual shooting of the stage, bringing up any tips or advice that may come to mind, and then finally grading my performance using a school grading system, A to F, as a fun way to encapsulate my general thoughts of my own performance in hindsight. So the stage I chose for this video is from the same match as the last stage analysis video I did, and it's from the regional qualifier match at East Glastonbury. Now this stage was the timed stage, and the time stage for matches can be very important in your overall standings at the end of the day, because if there are any ties for points for the overall match points, the way the scoring works is anyone who has the highest score with the lowest time on the tiebreaker will be put above those that are tied with you but do worse on the time stage. So again, this was the time stage for this particular match, and to summarize it in 2 words, I would say it was just go fast, because there was just one target you can see here on the screen at 70 yards, and given the distance of 70 yards, it was fairly generous. You can see based on my reticle on the target, that's a circle, it's about 1 mil in diameter, but because of that you really had to plan your stage in order to go fast as possible. And the way Dory was filming this, she was quite close to me, so there's not really a good shot where you can see all the positions. But right about here, you can see 3 of the 4 positions. So there were 4 rocks that were just marked with these orange circles, and then there's another one off to the right, off screen. And you simply double tapped, took 2 shots at the 70-yard target from each of the 4 rocks. So pretty straightforward, 4 rocks, 2 shots each. The only thing that made this stage a little bit less straightforward was this 4th position here. This is the 4th rock I'm shooting off of. And you can see in my scope view, there is a rock in front of the shooting position. Now this rock is actually maybe about 10 yards in front of you. And this rock you have to be really careful of, because you can see it's obscuring my view of the target slightly. So if I was any more right on this rock, I wouldn't have a direct line of sight to the target. And you'll notice I'm double stacking these bags because underneath the target was at a slight decline from the shooting position. So if you weren't elevated enough, there would be like a little shrub in your way. So you had to get elevated and be in the right position on this rock to not have this rock in front of the shooting position obscured. But besides that, the other shooting positions were quite straightforward. Just because a stage is straightforward doesn't mean there's not a little bit of planning that goes into it though. And again, because I knew that given our rifle's capabilities and the target size and the distance, there was really good chance a lot of people were going to clean the stage. So I wanted to prioritize speed without sacrificing any points, obviously, because whenever it comes to a time stage, you never want to sacrifice points for time, because points are ultimately the most important. So as I'm getting ready for the stage here, you might notice that I'm actually using a bag attached to the rifle. This bag was from, I believe it's an Area 419 plate with a medium-sized game changer on it. And if you watch my match footage or my match recaps, you'll realize that I very rarely use a bag attached to the rifle. In fact, this bag wasn't even my own. I asked a shooter to borrow it because, again, I wanted to go fast and I thought this might help me on the stage. This wasn't my bag, but a shooter in my squad had one, and I had seen him run it previously in the day, so I asked if I could borrow it. And usually shooters are quite good in letting you borrow their gear if you ask politely and you don't do it too frequently to be annoying. And another thing I did prepare for was, as you can see in this scope camera, I turned on the illumination for my reticle, because when you're shooting a lot of woods matches, or it depends on your backdrop, for example, mulch berms are also quite bad for quickly picking up and reading your target reticles. Sometimes a little bit hard to read, especially again in the forest like this, you have all these sticks and stuff in the background. So I wanted to make sure that I could pick up the center of my reticle very quickly. So the Razor Gen 3 I was using at the time has really nice illumination, and to my eye, it's actually even brighter than when it shows up in the scope camera. So I turn on the illumination for this stage as well. There's not a great shot of all the rocks in one shot, but the way they were situated on this hill, there was a little bit of elevation changes, so you did have to be careful of your footing. You weren't just moving left to right on a flat surface. You were sort of working around tree roots and stuff. So I did actually even plan how I was going to move. I guess you could call it like footwork. You know how a lot of like IPSC shooters or USPSA shooters will plan their footwork when they're going through a stage and visualizing what they're going to do. I did something similar, and I said, all right, I'm going to take a step here. I know exactly how I'm going to move around this rock to the next one. And this all takes just a couple seconds, but it was something that I did think of prior to shooting the stage so I could try and get the fastest time possible. I'll bring up the stage scores now because I think it's interesting to review. So spoiler alert, I did get the highest score and lowest time on this stage for the day. But as you'll notice, there are some other very quick times, and I knew there was going to be high scores and low times for this stage. That's why I really wanted to plan it well. And there's also some shooters that ended up dropping a few points, even though the target was a little bit generous. If you didn't have perfect execution, you could still have a little bit of a wobble to push you off the target. Or as I mentioned before, because the fourth position was on this rock, where you could have an issue with clearing some obstacles in front of you. Perhaps they weren't in an optimal position or elevated enough in order to get those impacts. So again, planning, it doesn't matter what stage it is, no matter how simple it seems, planning a stage thoroughly is always the best way to ensure the most success. Now I mentioned I double stacked a bag here, and one of them, the black one, is attached to the rifle. So this brown colored bag, it started in my hand, and as soon as the timer went off, I tossed it onto the rock, and I was lucky enough because it actually landed on the rock, basically in the perfect position for me to go later on into my last position and just drop down on top of that bag. So you can see here, once my time starts, again, hard to see right now, but below what the camera can see, I'm holding the spare bag, or the second bag, and as soon as the time starts, I toss it onto that rock right there, and I managed to land it right on top of the rock, which was perfect. So here we go on the stage again. Because it's a generous target, I'm making sure that my reticle is nice and solid in the middle of the reticle, and then pulling the shot. I also want to mention that even though I'm going fast, I'm trying my best not to be too sloppy with where I pull the shot and still have just enough follow through where I'm not being sloppy with my fundamentals, but I'm not really spotting my hits, because the fact that we were shooting in the forest at a fairly close target and it was a low wind day, I knew a wind hole was totally out of the question anyway. So as long as my reticle was in the middle, I pulled the shot, and I wasn't really doing perfect follow through to the point where I was looking at where it was impacting the target. If it hit, it was good enough for me to move on. And with that run, it was 42.82 for my time, which again was good enough to land me the top score for the stage of the day. We'll watch it again here quickly so I can maybe explain a few more things. Again, this bag toss was a little bit lucky. It landed in the perfect spot. And I still like to get my knee up for a little bit extra rear stability. And again, my footwork, even though it looks like I'm going fast, was pre-planned. I knew how I wanted to move around the rock, because I'm not only moving to the side here, you can see I'm moving backwards diagonally to the next rock while keeping my rifle pointed in a safe direction. And another tip for you is when you want to shoot a target like this with fast follow-up shots, you got to make sure that you're nice and steady before you pull the first shot, because if you're not perfectly steady, any movement from recoil or cycling the bolt will require you to resettle the gun again on the bag before taking the second shot. So if you make sure that you're nice and stable on the bag and prop before you take the first shot, makes your bolt cycle and follow-up shot a lot quicker because you don't have all that movement to deal with, and your reticle shouldn't move much, or you can get right back on target and take that follow-up shot very quickly. Like so. Again, sort of down a hill in front to the next position, and then from position 3 to position 4, I'm moving backwards again, and you can see I did sort of like a little crab walk and landed right on this bag, which I threw initially, and luckily it wasn't too far to the right. If I had thrown it a little bit more to the right, I would have had to reposition the bag so that I could clear that rock that was in front of the shooting position. But all in all, this was definitely a pretty good run, and it couldn't have been much more perfect. So another pretty good stage review, and because of that, and because of the little bag toss that was perfect, I have to give myself an A+. Now, as mentioned before, not all of the stage analysis videos I'm going to do are going to highlight only my good stages. Stay tuned, because the next installment is going to show a not so good stage from the same match. But anyway, hopefully that was helpful. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Cheers.